Loud. All right. Hey, Evo, welcome.
Thank you so much. How are you?
I'm doing well. Just sitting here with our plants
Yeah,
and our microphones.
yeah.
Well, I'm really excited to be interviewing for this Office of Film and Music newsletter. And, one of the things that I've mentioned to you before is like I don't even know when we met, but I know that we crossed paths as youth workers and somewhere in the nonprofit sector many years ago.
Yeah.
But I just see you out in community. You're like this amazing poet and writer and performer and sort of community hub and curator and teaching artist. You just do all the things. And I just really admire you as an artist that are really that's really values aligned. Most recently, I've been following your work on Facebook as you do home improvement projects. It's really new admiration
the biggest
for you.
part of my artistry. Really.
Yes, this is the artistry that I've really been tuned into recently.
Totally.
But I don't actually know that much about like your background or history, and I was just curious if you could tell me sort of about the path you've been on and how you decided to become an artist, a professional artist in the world, and what sort of values you really like work and live by.
Sure. So something that I've been telling people a lot lately is everything that I have, everyone that I know, and everything I am is because of my involvement in poetry. Either written or spoken or slam or not slam or whatever, whatever the case may be. Everyone I know is because of poetry. And so even like the job I have now, who I am as an artist now, like all of those things is because of my involvement in poetry. So I grew up in San Fernando Valley in Southern California. And I was, I was a young brown kid who was trying to figure out gender and expression and all these things. And poetry was sort of like this thing that I did for fun. It was like in, like little notebook in between my mattress that nobody ever saw. And I tell people that I was so closed off from the bigger picture of the world that I thought I invented spoken word for like a couple of years.
Where you're like, I'm a genius.
Yeah, like I was like, my poetry has to be said out loud. And that's new for some reason. And like I think I called it like jazz poetry, right? Like I thought it was so like super cool.
Wow.
And like so like that to me was like informing of like, wow, you had no idea of a bigger world outside of what you were doing, right?
Yeah.
So that was really interesting. But then and then I tell everyone that I like fell for every person that doesn't graduate high school. The system has some sort of plan for you, and I feel like I fell victim to all of them. So I went to vocational school. I went to community college. That didn't work out. I went to and then I joined the military, which is the next thing, right? And so I was in the military for 2.5 years on an aircraft carrier, and that was weird and awful. So and as I was exiting the military, I was trying to find something familiar. I was, from Southern California. I had been previously in Illinois during the winter time, which was like a whole new world for me. And then they sent me to Seattle in July where it was raining. And I was like, what is happening? I don't know anything about the world. Like, what's going on? And so I was trying to find something familiar. And I used to attend the Poetry Lounge in LA. And so I was like searching for a poetry slam. And so I found a poetry slam, Seattle Poetry Slam, and it was at Fremont at that time, this little dinky bar in this very white neighborhood. And there were like people of color there and people talking about real things there. And I was like, oh, cool. And so this became my like place that I went regularly, and I prepared for it. Like I wrote a poem every week just so I could read at this place and feel part of the thing, and then that just quickly escalated into a network of all like it just exploded into Youth Speaks and the whole youth network that way. And then I was living in Everett, so there was this another community of like older poets in Snohomish that I then connected with. And, you know, like it was just all these little pockets of art and poetry. And I attended Bumbershoot, like back when it was like $7 and you could sit at Starbucks, like, and there was like a bus from the North End that took you to Seattle Center.
Totally, I remember that.
And I was like, how are y'all doing this on $7? But like, and so I attended this show that was Youth Speaks, a Berkeley team, Seattle, and I think it was Bellingham for some reason. And I was just so overwhelmed with what this culture that I did, this world that they were all part of, that seems so cool, right? And that was the day I decided that I was going to stay in Seattle and not go back home, that I was going to figure this thing out.
Amazing.
Yeah, and so I did. I figured it out. Like I was, I used to call myself the Susan Lucci of slam poetry, because I had never won a spot on a team for like 6 years or something. And I was just like, well, I'm just that guy, you know, like that's just not gonna win one, you know? And so, but that challenged me to want to be better, right? Like to see what was happening and how culture was accepting these poets and, you know, like all of that. And I would never trade that learning in the world for anything now. Like I was like, go Susan Lucci, you're like the best soap opera actress there is. Right.
And then didn't you actually end up being like the 5th at World's Poetry Slam? Yeah. So Susan Lucci really got hers, you know?
Yeah, she finally got her Emmy. And like I was like, and that's what it felt like in Arizona, Flagstaff, Arizona, the paradise of the United States, apparently.
Yes. The loveliest city, Flagstaff.
And you know, I felt the safest there. So but yeah, so anyway, so I did end up getting all of that, you know, like, which is also another wild time. And then I was able to connect to LGBTQ communities. And so because, you know, I'm part of that alphabet of people, so in so many different ways. And so I was able to use my poetry to then advocate for folks or young folks or whatever it is. And what I'm learning now is that like it's not really the power of poetry, but the power to articulate what it is that you want people to know is what really is the tool and the resource that, you know, poets and writers have, or the ability to tell a story in a way that many people will understand versus the one singular person, which is also like artists in general, right? Like filmmakers like do that all the time with, you know, the pan of the desert or whatever. And I'm like, wow, how did I get that from just that, you know? So anyway.
Oh my God. Thank you for telling me that story. I think there's something so sweet to hear about, like your young self in that bedroom, like secretly writing poetry. It's just like that your spirit or body just like knew what was gonna be like healing and powerful, like that you just had that artist spirit in you from such a young age, and that to hear like the arc of finding it as an adult was really beautiful.
Well, we call my younger self Weebo.
Weebo?
Yeah.
That's so cute. Oh, little Weebo.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I really like, I mean, I'm saying this over and over, but the thing that you're talking about is like you found this community and then you're like, oh, I have this power to sort of amplify these different communities that I'm part of. Like, how do you I don't know, how do you stay creatively ambitious and rigorous and also like stay aligned with your values inside of, you know, it's one thing to be an art, like I'm an artist in the world, but it's another to be like a working, grinding artist. Like, how do you do that inside of capitalism or the temptation of capitalism, you know?
Yeah, like I have this battle a lot because I'm like, how do I put a price on this thing that I do? Right. Like, and because it's really my story. Did I put a price on my life story or my or whatever? And the way I look at it as is in terms of me is that, like I explained in, you know, like when I was in high school, there were multiple teachers who told me that I would not be going to college, that I would not be getting higher education, and even kept me from going on college tours or applying to certain things, or, you know, like there was, you know, assessment tests that you needed to get into. And I remember distinctly, I was in a AP physics class And I was like, oh, I'm going to go take that assessment. And they were like, you don't need an assessment to go to community college, and had no history of what I wanted for myself. Right.
Yeah.
And so now as an adult, the fact that I still don't have that college paper or whatever, the very expensive paper everybody keeps waving around, but because I don't have that, colleges literally are inviting me to their campuses and paying me to teach their students.
Yep.
Which is wild to me, right? So like that battle that I have is like, oh, well, I'm in a place you never wanted me to be.
Yeah.
And they paid me to be here versus me paying them to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate like, haha.
Yeah, right? Like I'm just like, yeah.
Yeah.
Teacher, if that's your real name. Sorry.
Yeah, teacher. Yeah, I mean, I just think that's amazing. And I think that's the power of like when you build your own power or your own creativity, like what's possible, what doors open, you know, despite what barriers people try and put in front of you.
Yeah, like I feel like finding your definition of freedom for yourself and having that sense of freedom for yourself unlocks your whole path for me.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I'm curious as a person, you know, who is a professional artist, the hustle is real, right? Like how do you have any advice for other artists who are trying to sort of make a career in artistry and how to make it financially sustainable? Like what are your practices around how you value your worth and your creative labor and, you know, just to make life possible for yourself?
Yeah, I think that one, giving yourself a price is probably the hardest thing to do, especially when you're talking about your identities and you know, like all of this heavy stuff. But I think that what I found in the line of of what part of this is my passion and what part of this is business. Yeah. Right. And so when I'm writing a poem for some corporation or something and that they're going to put on a commercial for 30 seconds, I know that there is a bank load of stuff happening there that I can give my real price to them. Yeah. Right. But I am, you know, doing a poem on the steps of City Hall for, you know, whatever, like that's a totally different, that's part of my passion. Like, and that also helps me, like literally helps me be part of the world and be heard and be seen and all of that. So those two things are different. Or if I'm selling my book to a book package to a white woman's book club that wanted to learn about trans folks for some reason, you know, like that is going to be a real price versus my donation to BIPOC young people, you know, in whatever situations they might be in.
Yeah.
So I mean, sticking to those and not wavering because someone flinches, right? Like I think that like if a corporation's like, oh, we wanted to offer you $50 for an hour performance at this very large event or whatever, and you know, like it's some sneaker company, right? Like you're like, I know that $50 is not like real, like you know what I mean? Like what are you talking about? So sticking to those and not flinching. And then the other thing is giving yourself a budget per year because this is your income, like this is your job, right? Like you work for you. And so I have 7 free to low cost shows that I'll do a year. That are past my passion, right? Like even if it's not my passion, and I try to stick to those. I'm sorry, I've done all of those shows for the year, right? And you know, when October comes around, I don't have any more shows to do like that. You know, so because I've used them all up, right? So I think a lot of it is budgeting your time and where you want it to be spent.
Yeah, I think that's such a good like pro tip. I feel like when I first went freelance, I was just like randomly setting rates. And then it wasn't until like, you know, I think 10 months in where I'm like, I'm not actually making enough money to like cover my bills that I did my annual budget of like, okay, what do I spend on food? What do I spend on, you know, it's mostly just food. What do I spend on like my car every month? What am I, you know, all these things. And like, what do I actually need to make over that so that I can have savings or I can have a buffer? And then kind of doing the backwards math on like, what would my rate per hour be? Like that was a total game changer for me. And I love what you're saying around like hold certain spots for community folks so that, you know, like I can do this many a year because, you know, especially if you're in community, you want to say yes to everything.
Right.
And it's just like, just so much time and energy, there's only so much you can put out in the world, I think.
And I also think that there's this new wave of like, because memes are global, right? There's this like this way in which we like simplify things to put on this square.
Yeah.
And like I see a lot of things that's like, I'm not working for exposure and blah 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 and all this stuff. And I'm like, if you just started, yeah, you're gonna need to do some exposure work. Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like I'm not like I've never, when I was a younger poet, like there were things that I did for free, absolutely, because I wanted people to know me.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and so like there is a level of exposure. And then when you get to that place, offering that discounted rate for the fact of doing something that will get you to meet people might be okay. Right.
Yeah.
It's just really up to you how, like, again, like it's a budget really. Like, can you do that for that little and then do this for a little bit more?
Yeah, that kind of reminds me, like, what are your like best tips? Because I feel like in the beginning of like freelance or becoming a kind of professional artist, it's like all reputation, and what are your best kind of tips around how to build up a reputation where people are like just telling other people like, you should hire this person, you should hire this person,
Yeah, I think that building authentic relationships is helpful.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that, not only like building friendships and stuff, I think that if you don't, like, let's say you just don't vibe with someone, don't work with them.
Yeah.
Like, don't force yourself to work with anybody you don't want to work with, because that comes out in the ways in which you work with someone.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that person might be beneficial to you, but if you don't vibe well, the product's not going to get done, right? Or in the way that
your dog agrees,
right? And yeah, like, and it's not going to be the way you want it to come out for either of you, really.
Yeah.
So I think that when I work with folks, I make intentional decisions now, and that way we're actually going to have we're going to have a good time, the product's going to be great, and then we're both going to be proud of it, and that person then is going to be like, well, I'm going to suggest Ebo to do this for this person and for that, because it's real. It's not just like, oh, let me go into my Rolodex and pick out a poet.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Well, I know that you have a book out right now called Insubordinate. It's on your website, ebobarton.com.
It's right here.
It's beautiful. Will you tell me a little bit about the book or any other projects that you are working on right now?
Sure. Like the current project that I'm working on is getting an audiobook made, which I feel like it's really late in the game for me to be doing. But it's just rough. But yeah, so this is my first published collection of poetry. And it's a lot of it is around identity and how I have to exist in this identity. The title is called Insubordinate. And I was called that a couple years ago by a large group of folks. And it was Youth Speaks, actually, the youth poets, who were like, to whom, right? Like every adjective that you're given is really by the person giving it to you. Always. Okay, sorry.
No worries.
But yeah. Okay. So yeah, so like I feel like that's why the title became Insubordinate, because it's such an interesting word, because it's just like, well, who's saying it is really all that matters. Like diversity. How many times have you heard in Seattle a group of white women and a black person is diverse? Right. Like that group was just so diverse, was it? Like, you know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. Congratulations on the book. And I can't wait to hear the audiobook.
Yeah, I'm scared.
You have the microphone for it. So I can feel it's coming soon.
I have the tools. I just have to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Any like last, I don't know, words of wisdom from you, especially I think coming out of such a hard year with the pandemic, of being an artist, being a freelancer, of just like things that you've done to keep yourself well and resilient in this time?
Yeah, well, being a follower of my outdoor projects,
love them.
Number
one fan.
I should just have an Instagram dedicated to my backyard. But what I started doing, honestly, was like putting my grief into something that I could see the outcome of.
Yeah.
Because I found myself realizing that I've been doing a lot of work in setting it out versus being able to like have, right? Like for me. And so I've been putting a lot of my grief into my backyard, which is now something I, enjoy fully. Right. And I was actually telling someone this where it's like I'm sitting out there and I can see little like flaws in the system, right? Like where I'm like, ooh, maybe I shouldn't have done that, or whatever. And it's either that I want to go after it and do it and fix it, or appreciate it for the flaw that it is and be like, yeah, that's when I like totally almost staple gunned my, my sleeve to the fence, like, or, whatever. And so, yeah, it's been really interesting to be able to look at something and appreciate the flaws, which is new behavior for me. And then, or like want to go and actually fix it. And like, because this is my space and my thing. And, yeah, it's just really a different feeling of creation when it's just for you.
Yeah, totally. I think there's something so powerful and like nourishing about building things with your own hands.
Yeah.
And also it just gets us out of our brains right now, which I feel like we're just constantly in anxiety and survival.
Yeah, like somebody was saying like, oh, it must have been so cool to just turn your brain off and do this like outdoor project and build the pergola and all this stuff. And I was like, actually, what it did is that when you're building and doing things like this, your mind is constantly thinking, right? Like, okay, so that measurement, and then here, and then I'm going to put it up here. Okay, so if I lift it, and then, so that's why your brain is distracted, is because there's thinking going on, right? Like, so that has been incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good tip.
About wood, the price of lumber, than the state of the world right now.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And there's something about building a space that feels safe for us right now. Like we really need that. If sort of the outside world isn't, like, how do we keep ourselves safe, right?
Yeah. Build your home to be the safe place.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Are you a Cancer?
No.
What sign?
I'm a Leo.
No way. Yeah. That's incredible. I would have never guessed that in a million years. About
what are you?
I'm very sensitive Cancer.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Which is the nesting situation that you see happening.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Very domestic. I'm very domestic. Tell all your friends I'm domestic. Okay.
We'll put this up on the internet. Everybody will know you're very domestic now.
Really? Domestic, huh?
Well, I just so appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me and share like all your pearls of wisdom on this. It's so awesome to be with you. And I hope people go out and get your book, Insubordinate, on ebobarton.com.
Yeah. Shop. There's also weird merch that you can purchase as well. Bookmark keychains. I got some shirts left. And then there's also a card that says "Make a mistake with me." Nobody usually catches that, but there is a typo in it.
It is intentional typo.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I think this is what I'm talking about. This is like the hustle of being a freelance artist. You got to get your keychains, you got to get your books, get your shop set up on your website. It's
not just the book. Like you have to have this full package of stuff, like you start to learn about subtotals on, like what are the average subtotals? I'm like, do I care? What? Buy my book.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, you're done.